Do you want to know how to take better vacation photos, but you're not a photographer? I am going to share with you 25 travel photography tips that will help you get way better photos when you travel with your family. So keep watching. Welcome back to Top Flight Family. I'm Carmen Sanyovi, and our channel is all about fostering togetherness by experiencing new adventures here in New York City where we live and all around the world because we love to travel. So this video is actually the first in a whole series I'm doing on how to take better vacation photos. So if you're new to us, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next one. Let me get one thing out of the way first. Yes, I am a travel blogger. However, I am not a photographer at all. In fact, I don't even own a DSLR camera. So I actually have a lot more in common with the average traveler than you might think. But I have done this for a while, so there are certain things I've figured out along the way, and those are the 25 travel photography tips that I'm gonna share with you in this video. Tip 1 is plan your outfits. So when I say plan your outfits, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to wear matching ski sweaters. That's not what this is about. However, one very easy way to up the quality of your photos is just to put a little bit of thought into what everyone is wearing. So let me show you a couple examples. So this is a photo from a trip that we did to Cape Cod back in 2016 when I was first starting to think about starting Top Flight Family. And you can see that, me and Serge are both wearing gray and black. He's kind of got athleisure on. The girls are in blue and white, and they have dresses on. So we just kind of look very mismatched, both in terms of style and in color. Here is another photo that we took in Orlando, a trip from the same year. And again, I'm in black, Serge is in gray and camo shorts. Sean is in blue and white. Ella's in pink and white. And again, it's kind of like we just don't look cohesive. Now, contrast that to this photo, which was taken later the same year on a trip to Aruba. Now, we did have a photographer, so obviously the quality of the photo is way better as well. But notice how we look much more cohesive because we're all dressed in similar colors. And here's another photo from a trip the following year to Hong Kong. And again, even though we're all wearing sort of different styles of clothes, we are wearing a similar color palette, blue and white. Sean has a little bit of red. The girls both have stripes, even though they don't have necessarily identical dresses on. And again, just the whole picture hangs together so much better because we look a little bit more coordinated. So next time you go on a trip, just put a little bit of thought into what each of the family members is wearing. Tip number 2 is scout locations. Before you leave for your trip, actually do a little bit of basic research to find out where are some really good spots to take pictures. Are there any particularly scenic areas, natural landscapes, or just like cute buildings or streets that are really picturesque? So I'm just gonna type in Instagrammable Quebec City and see what comes up. It's got all these cool blog posts. So Instagram hotspots, 15 sexy Instagram shots in winter. Let's look at this first one. It is a travel blog about Canada, and it lists this princess castle, this huge waterfall, ice hotel. So already I've got plenty of great ideas, and there's all these other articles as well. Tip number 3 is get there early. If you are going to a place that is very popular with tourists or just even locals, don't expect to get there at like noon and have the place to yourself. Understand that popular places get crowded, so plan accordingly. By the way, I've put together a cheat sheet with all 25 of these travel photography tips. If you'd like a free copy so you can refer to them before your next trip, just go to the link in the description below, enter your email address, and I'll send it to you right away. Tip number 4, shoot at sunset. Now the real tip is that the best light is at either sunrise or sunset. Since you're traveling with kids, I'm gonna assume that getting to a place at sunrise isn't gonna be the easiest thing. So I think for a lot of us, an easier way to do this is to get to a place at sunset. If you are going to a bunch of places in one particular day, think about what's the place where you really want to capture the best photos, like the place that's the most important to you in terms of location, and try to plan your itinerary and your schedule for that day so that you are getting to that particular location around sunset. If you want to know what time sunset is, I think there's actually some apps on your phone that help you do that, but you can also just Google it. Google what time is sunset in London, and it'll let you know exactly what time sunset happens that day. Number 5, shoot in the shade. Now, before I started having a lot of pictures taken and taking a lot of photos, I always assumed that the more light, the better, so that if it's a bright, sunny day, that's really the best kind of day to take pictures. Now, in reality, if there's a lot of sunlight and there's not a lot of cloud coverage, you can get some really harsh light, which can cause some weird shadows. It's actually better to take pictures in the shade because you have more even lighting, or on an overcast day. So if you look out and it's overcast, don't be like, oh my God, this is gonna be a horrible day to take pictures. It can actually be even better because the clouds kind of diffuse the light and give it a more even and a softer kind of quality. So just to give you an example, this is a photo that we took on a recent trip to Disney World. The choice was between this wall, which had some interesting greenery in the back, or we could, but it was in the sun, had weird shadows, or we could have gone to a less picturesque wall and been completely in the shade. So as you can see, there's like some weird shadows, there's like lines going across Ella's face. And in retrospect, I think we would have been better off taking a few steps to the left and taking the photo completely in the shade, even if the background was less interesting. Now, sometimes it's unavoidable to take a picture in direct sunlight, and I have a little bit of a tip for you. If you are taking a picture and the people you're taking a picture of are more or less looking into the sun, so they're kind of like squinting and the picture is looking weird, one trick that I've learned from a couple of photographers is ask them to keep their eyes closed, and then when you tell them to open, then they open and smile. And so that is gonna actually result in a much more natural kind of smile. And they're not gonna be squinting because once they open their eyes are kind of in a more natural kind of position. Tip number 6 is don't look at the camera. Most family vacation photos are gonna be of the family looking and smiling into the camera. Nothing wrong with that. However, you can get much more interesting shots if you vary it. So let me show you an example. So this is a trip that we did to Montreal a few years back, and we were working with a photographer there. And as you can see in this picture, we're looking at the camera. It's okay. I think we're squinting a little bit because the sun was in our eyes, but it's an okay picture. Then if you look at this one, we're in the same exact location. We're also at the fountain, but in this one, we're actually not looking at the camera. We're looking at the fountain. We are checking out the coins that people have thrown in there. I think Sir just kind of telling the girls a little bit about the history of this fountain. And it just makes for a more interesting picture, I think, because it's more capturing how we were actually on the trip rather than just all of us smiling into the camera. Tip number 7, photograph from behind. If you look at some of the most popular photos, travel photos on Instagram or Pinterest, one thing you'll notice that very often the human in the photo is fairly small in the frame compared to the landscape. And very often they're being photographed from the back. Now, the reason that this is so effective is it takes the focus away from the face, so the person's face, and it puts the focus more on the thing that you want the viewer to look at. And in a way, it makes the viewer of the photograph feel like they are in that place as well. So this is a series of photos that we took in Atlanta last year. And this is a photo of Sean looking up at this art installation at the High Museum of Art. And as you can see, she's sitting on the floor. We see her from the back, and you really get a sense of like the scale of this piece. Here is a picture of me, also from the back. This is at the Center of Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta. And I'm basically just kind of overlooking the balcony and, you know, this huge glass wall that's there. So the two examples I've showed you are of a solo person with the photograph being taken from the back. But you can also do this with a group shot. So this is a photo of our entire family looking at this mural, also at the same location. And again, it's sort of like putting the viewer more into our shoes, and they're looking at what we're looking at. Tip number 8 is shoot in the moment. You don't always have to take posed pictures, even if they're sort of planned pictures. So planned is like a candid looking photo that's actually planned. You know, planneds are fine, posed pictures are fine, but also don't be afraid to capture things as they're actually happening, particularly when you're photographing kids. Some of the best photos that we have from our travels are of the girls just in the middle of doing whatever crazy stuff that they're doing. So let me show you a couple examples. So in this picture, we're at Allen's Boots in Austin, which is this huge store filled with cowboy boots. And the girls were having so much fun in there trying on different cowboy boots. And as you can see, this is a picture of them just strutting back and forth in their boots, like loving every moment. And then this is another picture I love. This was in Nyack, New York, which is in Hudson Valley, and we were staying at the Time Hotel, and we were just hanging out by the pool, and it's just like a candid moment of the girls like joking around with each other, playing. And you know, I love capturing moments like this, and particularly when you're photographing kids, getting them to pose doesn't always work. I mean, you may have very cooperative kids. My girls are only cooperative about 30% of the time. So a lot of the times we're really focusing on trying to capture whatever they're doing kind of in the moment candidly. Tip number 9 is use motion. You can get much more interesting pictures if the subjects are actually moving. So try taking pictures when you're walking or running or jumping, and I'm going to show you a few examples. So this is a picture of us in Jamaica a couple years ago, and as you can see, it's just a very simple shot of us walking along this walkway. And because we're walking, it just feels a little bit more interesting than if we were just standing still. And this is another photo of us also walking. This one was in Copenhagen in Denmark, where we went last fall. And again, because we're walking, it just looks a little bit more interesting because it's really showing us within the environment rather than all of us standing there looking at the camera. Here is a photo of us running. This was in Austin on South Congress Avenue. You can see Allen's Boots, is that cowboy boot store behind us. And this is just a really fun picture because it's like us running as we're crossing the street, and it just gives it a lot of energy and just more of a fun feel. This is another example of a running picture that we've done. This one was in Aruba, and this was in the downtown area. And you know, here we are running, and again, it just makes a more interesting picture and a little bit more fun. Now, if you want to take it up a notch, you can also try jumping, like this picture also taken in Aruba. Now, once you get adults involved in jumping, it gets kind of corny pretty quickly. Like this picture is very much on the border of being cheesy, I totally admit. But if you're taking pictures of kids and sometimes they don't really feel like posing for a picture, getting them to jump is often something that they will love to do. I know my girls love taking jumping pictures. So play around with that. It's just another way to keep things a little bit more interesting. Tip number 10 is put yourself in the picture. This is such a problem for families when they're going on vacation. Very often one person in the family is sort of the unofficial photographer for the entire family. Then you never see that person in any of the pictures. So it's great to kind of focus on getting good pictures, but every once in a while you want to make sure that you're in the pictures as well. Otherwise those family memories are really not complete. The next few tips I'm going to share with you is going to help you do exactly that. Tip number 11, ask for help. If you're gonna put yourself in the photo, but you're the main family photographer, you have to come on the other side of the camera. And so one easy way to do this is to ask whoever is around to see if they could take a picture of your family. I highly encourage that you actually pose the rest of your family where you want them to be. You actually kind of frame up the picture where you want it to be, and you ask the person to take it exactly the way that you're showing them. So it might be like, oh, you want to make sure you get the top of this roof, or we want to cut out this, garbage can at the bottom. So kind of frame it up the way that you want and ask them to take it exactly like that. It's not always going to work out perfectly, but you at least have a better chance of getting a semi-decent picture than if you just let them completely make their own decision. Now, if the goal is to get yourself in the photo, don't be afraid to ask your kids to take photos. Splurge and I have a couple of pretty good pictures of the two of us together where Sean, our older daughter, actually took them. So this one, for example, is Splurge and I at the Alamo in San Antonio, and Sean took this one. And it's not, professional grade, but it's a pretty decent picture of the two of us. Previous year, we were in Martha's Vineyard, and Sean also took this picture. Again, pretty good. I feel like she has some sense of sort of aesthetics and some basic composition. So you'd be surprised by what good photographers your kids are actually at this young age. Tip number 12 is hire a photographer. Hiring a photographer at the location that you're going to can be a lot more affordable than you might think. Don't assume that this is something that only celebrities or travel bloggers or influencers do. This is something that the average family can do as well. So how do you find a photographer? So I'm going to share with you a few different techniques that I have used and kind of the pros and cons of each. If you know someone at the destination, ask them for a referral, see if they know anyone who is a great photographer. If you don't know anyone in the area, a good place to actually ask is your hotel. It's very likely that they work with a photographer or two to shoot content for their website or their social media accounts. So actually ask the hotel to see if there's anyone that they work with that they can recommend. Another way that you can find a local photographer is on Instagram. So very often I have gone on Instagram to find photographers by typing in hashtags like whatever is the destination I'm going to, and then the word photographer. So for this upcoming Quebec City trip, I might type in hashtag Quebec City photographer. So I've had mixed results with this, to be honest. I've come across some really great photographers. I've also come across some really horrible photographers. So, you know, tread lightly with this technique. The third way you can find a photographer, and I think that this is probably the best option for the average family, is to use a vacation photography service. So you may not realize this, but there are companies that actually specialize in doing vacation photo shoots for people. The three that I've used in the past are Flytographer, Sweet Escape, and Localgrapher. The prices and the sort of packages will vary quite a bit. Each company structures things a little bit differently, but you can expect to pay anywhere between, let's say, $250 to $500 US dollars for a photo shoot, ranging anywhere from like 30 minutes to 2 hours. It's the best way to get the whole family into the picture and to really have those like precious family memories that you can treasure forever. A lot of families are already in the habit of doing an annual family portrait photo shoot, maybe for their holiday cards. So instead of doing that, why not capture like candid moments while you're on a special family vacation together? I think that's a really, really worthwhile thing to invest in. Tip number 13, get a small tripod. So if you're an average family, you probably don't want to be lugging around like a full-size tripod just to take a few pictures of the entire family. But a good alternative is to get a small tripod. So I have one that I carry around. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it today. I was gonna show you, and I'm not using it right now. But there's, you know, small tripods that are like, you know, maybe this high that are really useful because you can just plop it down somewhere and then get the whole family in a picture. But there's also these bendy tripods, and these are useful because you can actually loop them around, you know, let's say a railing or something like that. And so these are handy because you can kind of just like hang them anywhere and get a picture of everyone that way. Tip number 14 is learn the camera you have. People often get caught up with this idea that you need super expensive gear. You know, whenever I share photos from our travels with people, one of the first things that people will ask is, what kind of camera do you have? It's not really about what kind of camera you have, it's really about the technique. And I will say that I've been on sort of like group trips with other content creators or bloggers who have really expensive cameras, and I'm thinking like, oh wow, like I feel like such an amateur with my iPhone here. And then after the trip, I see the pictures that they took and they're terrible. They're terrible because they haven't really learned how to use that camera. And meanwhile, my dinky little iPhone is producing much better images. It's really important to not get caught up with thinking like you need to buy super expensive gear. Use whatever you already have and just learn how to maximize its potential. Most of us only use 10% of our brain. It's the same thing with smartphone photography. You know, most of us are only using 10% of this phone's capability when it comes to taking pictures. So I highly encourage you, whatever kind of camera you have, whether it's just your phone or you have some kind of point and shoot, you know, really maximize what you can do with that camera before you go on investing in better gear. Tip number 15 is use iPhone burst mode. Burst mode is one of the sort of most underrated and underused functions on an iPhone. Instead of taking a picture by just tapping that white button once in the built-in camera, you actually hold down the white button and then the camera will basically go and keep bursting and taking a whole bunch of pictures as long as you're holding it down. Burst mode is a really great way, especially to capture action shots. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So earlier this year, we were in Disney World and on a Disney cruise as part of Disney Creator Days, which was a trip where Disney invited 50 different content creators to come and basically experience these cool things that they had put together. So when we were at Disney World, we had done a professional shoot and I shared those pictures on Instagram, and you know, people definitely liked it, but it wasn't like the response wasn't overwhelming. Then I shared these pictures that I took myself on the cruise ship using iPhone burst mode, and these were the ones that got the most engagement. Even though these were not professionally taken, they were just taken by me, who is not a photographer, and they were just on my dinky little iPhone. So this first picture is of Sean jumping up on the Disney cruise ship, and you know, her hair is flying everywhere and she's got a big smile on her face, and people absolutely love this photo. And I also really love this photo of Ella, again, also taken in burst mode. She's jumping up, she's throwing up her Minnie Mouse doll at the same time, and again, both of these just like really capture the joy of being on a Disney cruise. So if you use burst mode, the iPhone will basically select what it thinks is the best picture out of the batch for you. And so if you go to your camera roll, that's the one that you're going to see. However, in my experience, the picture that the iPhone selects for you is never the best one. So what you want to do instead is actually go to all your albums. There under that list, you're going to see a folder or a link that says bursts. So you go to bursts, then you'll find that all the different bursts pictures that you've done. You go to the one that you just took, and then you hit select, and then you can scroll along the bottom and actually select which frame by frame. You can select which of the frames is the one that you like the most. Then you have an option to basically save that, and either you want to then make that the only one that you save and delete everything else, or you want to keep everything. I usually keep everything just in case something goes horribly wrong. Burst mode is a super useful tool when you're taking your own photos. Tip 16 is use the iPhone timer. The iPhone camera comes with a built-in timer. So if you want to click the timer icon at the top of the screen, and basically you can select how long of a pause it's going to wait until it takes the picture. It gives you time to run in front of the iPhone so that you can be in the picture. Now we're moving on to some basic camera or photography techniques. So tip 17 is wipe your lens. So this is a super basic thing, but it's something that, you know, even professional photographers don't always do. If there's a smudge on there, no matter how good a photo you take, there's no way you're gonna be able to get rid of that smudge. So always wipe your lens. Tip number 18 is keep snapping. One of the biggest differences between professional photographers and a non-photographer is that a non-photographer, like a lay person, when they take a picture, they might take one or two, and then they'll be like, okay, well, I took the picture. If you watch a real photographer at work, they just keep snapping. They snap. They'll keep varying their angle, taking it from down here, taking it from up here, asking their subject to kind of move slightly. Out of the hundreds or thousands of photos that they take during that shoot, they select the best one. Don't assume that taking a picture means going, meh, and you're done. No, take a whole bunch. You want to have as many options as possible, especially if you're photographing kids, because kids move around, they're sulky, but there might be that one moment where one of them has that perfect smile, and if you weren't snapping, you would miss that moment. So keep snapping. Tip number 19, learn the rule of thirds. Well, the idea is that you would divide your picture into 2 lines going vertically, 2 lines going horizontally. And you want to place your subject, or whatever is the most important thing in the picture, on either one of the horizontal lines or one of the vertical lines. And also whatever is the most important thing in the photo, ideally it should appear at either one of the 4 places where the 2 lines intersect. Now the great thing about the iPhone is that you can automatically do this, because you can actually go into your camera settings and turn on the grid, and then it'll automatically display this grid for you. So once you have this grid on your camera, it's so much easier for you to be able to place your subject in the right place. Tip 20 is learn headroom and rule of space. So I'm cheating a little bit here because these are really more like 2 different tips I'm molding into one. But continuing on basic composition techniques, headroom is the idea of how much space is between the top of your subject's head and the edge of the photo. If I go like this, there's basically no headroom. And if I go like this, there's too much headroom. Now, the rule of space has to do with taking a picture of someone who is looking either to the left or the right, and how much space you should leave on either side. So let's say you're taking a picture of me like this. This would actually be a good amount of space because I'm looking this way and there's a lot of space in front of me. So this is particularly important if you're taking pictures of someone in motion. So let's say you're taking a picture of someone walking in this direction. You want to make sure that there's a lot of room in front of them. Now, conversely, if I was looking this way, now as you can see, this composition is not as good because there's like all the space behind me, but not much in front of me. If you look at a picture and there's a lot of space in front of the direction the person is facing in, I think psychologically, like the picture makes you feel more comfortable because you feel like they're not going to be walking into a wall or something. Tip 21 is change your perspective. Now, most of us, and I'm guilty of this a lot, our default mode is we'll just take a picture at eye level. That's fine. You can get some decent photos that way, but you should always try to find different angles. So get down in a squat and see how it looks if you're kind of pointing upwards. Or conversely, see what it would look like if you do more of a bird's eye view. Stand on a chair, see how that looks. So you want to change sort of your angle and your levels and just play around with that, because you may find that it makes for a much more interesting picture. Tip 22, landscape and portrait. Take both landscape or horizontal pictures and portrait or vertical pictures. Whatever you're taking a picture of, do it both ways. Go landscape and then go portrait, and you'll sometimes be surprised by kind of how different of a feel each perspective has, and you may capture details in one that you missed in the other, and so forth. So definitely try that out. Tip 23 is respect your surroundings, because very often when we're traveling to different countries or to different communities, we are coming into a space where that doesn't really belong to us. You know, we're a guest in this place, in this community. And there are certain places that hold a sense of sacredness or just solemnity or importance, and we want to be respectful of that. So yes, our goal is always to take amazing images when we travel, but at the same time, you don't want to do that at the expense of disrespecting someone's culture or community. One of the very first trips Serge and I ever took together, this was way before we got married and had kids, was to Panama. And part of the trip to Panama, we actually stayed on San Blas Islands, which are still largely inhabited by the indigenous population there. One of the things we did on San Blas was we had a local guide who was part of the indigenous community, and he basically kind of took us on a walking tour around the island. So he took us to the village where all the locals live and kind of showed us kind of, you know, some of the artifacts that they make. And then he also took us to what was basically like an ancient burial site. And I just remember I was like up on this hill, and it just had this really solemn feel. And I just remember being so shocked because some of the other tourists that we were with were just like getting their cameras out and I just thought, you know what? This is a grave site. You know, like there's certain things, and maybe it's because I'm Chinese and, you know, we're a little weird about death, but I just feel like there are certain places where it just doesn't seem appropriate to take photos, and that was one of them. So that was one of those cases where I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna be taking out my camera here. Tip 24 is remove distractions. Sometimes you're on a trip and you take the perfect picture in the perfect location and you love everything about the picture except that there just happened to be someone walking by right when you were taking the picture in the background, or someone is like photobombing you on purpose. Don't despair, because you don't have to be a Photoshop expert yourself. You can very easily get these distractions removed. You can go to a website like Fiverr.com, and there you can find tons of people who will, just for a few bucks, $5, $10, depending on what kind of package and what kind of turnaround time you're looking for, they will easily remove any distracting objects from your photos for you. For example, this is a photo that I took at the Alamo of Sean and Ella, and I knew that I wanted to use this photo as my YouTube thumbnail. However, there are two things that I didn't love about this photo. One was that there's a ton of people in the background, so it just kind of, I really want the focus to be on the girls and the Alamo, but your eye is kind of distracted by all this other stuff going on in the background. And then the other thing is that with our YouTube thumbnails, I usually put our text in the bottom left-hand corner. But in this picture, the way I took it, there wasn't a lot of space there. So I actually went on Fiverr. I found someone to remove the people in the back, and then I even had them actually move the girls all the way to the right so that I'd have plenty of room on the left for my text. Now, I actually have one more bonus tip after this, so keep watching. But tip 25 is edit your photos. A lot of people who are not photographers don't realize that the beautiful images that they see on Instagram or on travel blogs or on Pinterest, those pictures don't look like that coming out of the camera. Pretty much every single picture you see on any kind of a fairly professional platform has been edited afterwards using some type of software. Basically, I would encourage you to learn a little bit of basic stuff about photo editing. I think in most cases, for most pictures that you might take on your smartphone, if you just simply bump up the brightness a little bit, sometimes that can be called exposure, depending on kind of what app you're using. If you bump up the brightness a little bit and then also bump up the saturation a little bit, saturation is kind of like how rich and strong or how popping the colors are. If you bump up those two things and maybe up the contrast just a tiny bit, usually I kind of bump it up to like 10 or 15, you will come out with a drastically better photo. So just those 3 simple tweaks can make a huge, huge difference. All right, here's my bonus tip. My bonus tip is put the camera down. Obviously, you want to take pictures, you want to take some great images, but also know when to put the camera down so you can actually just be in the moment and enjoy life with your family. After all, you guys probably spent some time and money and made some sacrifices to be able to go on this trip together, to create these family travel memories. So you don't want to spend the entire time chained to your camera. You want to, yes, certainly capture fun moments as they happen, but don't be afraid and don't forget to put your camera away sometimes so that you can actually just enjoy the moment. Okay, I am linking the next video in this series down here so you can check that out. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you will hit the like button. I hope you will subscribe and turn on notifications. And please share it with a friend. If you know someone who needs some help with their family travel vacation photos, send them this.